The Malleus Maleficarum is one of the darkest and most lethal books ever written. A book that not only fueled the witch hunts in Europe, but also defined an ideology of persecution and terror. Carl Sagan, in his book The Demon-Haunted World, describes it as a work that promoted unimaginable tortures and spread the infamous sentence, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Through its pages, thousands of people, mostly women, were condemned to the stake, accused of satanic pacts and heretical practices. Today we will explore its origins, its content, and its cursed legacy. Let's begin. The Malleus Maleficarum, known as the Hammer of Witches, was published in 1486 in Germany by Inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and Jakob Sprenger. Unlike other medieval treatises on heresy and faith, this book was not merely an exploration of supposed witchcraft. It had a clear and sinister purpose: to justify the existence of witches and provide a framework for their persecution. This was not just a theological text, it was a weapon, a war manual designed to legitimize terror and create an ideological foundation for witch hunts. Its pages contained no real evidence, only manipulative arguments, superstitions disguised as doctrine, and twisted logic that condemned its victims. Before they even stood trial, the paranoia fueled by this book spread like wildfire across Europe. Within months of its publication, thousands of women were arrested, tried, and executed, based on the methods outlined in the Malleus Maleficarum. Its influence was so far-reaching that more than a century later, during the infamous Salem witch trials, its legacy was still claiming victims. Over 400 people were accused of witchcraft in Salem, and more than 200 perished by fire, the noose, or under brutal torture. Despite its brutality, the Catholic Church never officially endorsed this book. In fact, the University of Cologne rejected it in 1487, declaring it illegal, unethical, and full of doctrinal errors. However, this did not stop its authors. Through deception, they forged an ecclesiastical endorsement, ensuring that the Malleus Maleficarum spread unchecked throughout Europe, stoking a terror that would endure for centuries. The result was mass hysteria and slaughter. For over 200 years, this text remained the second best-selling book after the Bible, leaving behind an enduring legacy of fear, persecution, and senseless death. The Malleus Maleficarum was not just a book about witchcraft. It was a step-by-step guide on how to hunt, torture, and execute those accused of it. It provided a chillingly detailed method for identifying witches, forcing confessions, and ensuring they never walked free. This was not about justice. It was about control, fear, and bloodshed. The book was divided into 3 sections, each more ruthless than the last. The first section was designed to convince readers that witches were real and that their connection to the devil was undeniable. It insisted that denying the existence of witchcraft was itself a form of heresy. It also laid the foundation for why women, more than men, were supposedly drawn to the dark arts. The authors claimed that women were weaker in mind and spirit, naturally more lustful, and therefore easier prey for demonic temptation. This misogynistic view ensured that the majority of accused witches were women, often those who were independent, knowledgeable, or simply different from their neighbors. The second section focused on the supposed activities of witches, describing the ways they harmed others. According to the book, witches could curse people with disease, kill livestock, ruin crops, and even control the weather. These accusations were based on pure superstition. If a storm destroyed a village's harvest, if a woman suffered a miscarriage, or if a neighbor fell ill, it was enough to point a finger. The book also accused witches of engaging in dark rituals, making pacts with the devil, and recruiting new followers through demonic seduction. Once someone was suspected of witchcraft, there was little they could do to prove their innocence. The third and final section of the book was the most disturbing. It laid out the process for interrogating accused witches and securing their confessions through torture. The authors of the Malleus Maleficarum claimed that witches were under the protection of Satan, and that only unbearable pain could force them to speak the truth. It encouraged judges to deceive the accused by promising mercy in exchange for a confession, only to sentence them to death once they admitted to witchcraft. Confession, the book argued, was necessary, but mercy was not. The methods of torture were brutal. Many women were subjected to sleep deprivation, beaten or crushed until they confessed to whatever their interrogators wanted to hear. Some were stripped naked and searched for the devil's mark, a birthmark or mole that was said to be proof of their allegiance to Satan. If a suspected witch screamed in pain, it was seen as evidence of guilt. After all, only someone who had made a pact with the devil would resist divine justice. If she remained silent, it was taken as proof that Satan was protecting her from suffering. Even her tears, or lack thereof, could be used against her. If she cried, she was faking remorse. If she didn't, she was too heartless to be innocent. No matter how a woman responded, the system was designed to condemn her. The book didn't just justify torture, it made it necessary. It instructed inquisitors on how to wear down the accused, how to use psychological manipulation to break them, and how to ensure their trials ended in execution. It created an environment where guilt was assumed and innocence was impossible to prove. The ultimate fate of most convicted witches was death. The preferred method was burning at the stake, a punishment believed to purify the soul through fire. But other victims were hanged, drowned, or subjected to slow, excruciating deaths meant to serve as public warnings. Entire villages gathered to watch these executions, convinced that they were witnessing divine justice in action. In reality, they were victims of a system fueled by fear, ignorance, and the brutal teachings of the Malleus Maleficarum. But the most terrifying thing about this book was not just the blood it shed, but the way it transformed people's minds. Because the Malleus Maleficarum didn't just persecute witches, it made everyone see demons on every street corner. This ancient book didn't just describe demonology, it weaponized it. It created a detailed, terrifying system that placed demons at the center of human suffering, ensuring that fear and paranoia would spread like wildfire. This wasn't just a book about witches. It was a manual on how to see the devil's hand in everything. It made people believe that they were constantly surrounded by unseen forces of corruption, and more importantly, that these forces were working through their neighbors, friends, and even family members. What made its demonology so powerful wasn't just the claim that witches had pacts with the devil. That idea wasn't new. What made it different was how the book made this connection unavoidable. It argued that witches couldn't exist without the direct influence of Satan, meaning that anyone accused of witchcraft was automatically an agent of hell. There was no room for misunderstanding or repentance. A person accused of witchcraft wasn't just guilty of breaking religious laws. They were, by definition, the enemy of God. This belief system created a cycle of fear that was almost impossible to escape. If someone was accused of being a witch, there was no way to prove their innocence, because the Malleus Maleficarum insisted that witches and demons were skilled at deception. If an accused woman denied the charges, it was proof that she had been trained by the devil to lie. If she confessed, she was executed. If she refused to cry during interrogation, it meant she lacked a soul, proving her guilt. If she cried too much, it was seen as an act to gain sympathy, which also proved her guilt. No matter what she did, the end result was the same: torture and death. One of the most insidious ideas in the Malleus Maleficarum was that demons didn't just interact with witches, they actively recruited them. The book claimed that witches could lure new members into their ranks through demonic intervention, turning even the most innocent women into servants of hell. This idea created an atmosphere of constant suspicion. If someone in a village was accused of witchcraft, it was assumed that they were trying to recruit others, which meant that more people needed to be accused, interrogated, and executed. Entire communities tore themselves apart because of this belief, turning neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, and even families against their own blood. Perhaps the most disturbing element of its demonology was the obsession with sexuality. The Malleus Maleficarum claimed that witches gained power through sexual acts with demons, which turned ordinary desires into something monstrous. It argued that women were naturally more lustful than men, and therefore more likely to be seduced by demons. This made women the primary targets of the witch hunts, not because they actually practiced magic, but because they were seen as inherently weak, corruptible, and dangerous. This stylized demonology justified some of the most horrific interrogations in history. Women accused of witchcraft were often stripped naked and searched for the devil's mark, a spot on the body where Satan supposedly left his signature. If any unusual blemish, mole, or scar was found, it was taken as proof of their allegiance to the devil. Some were subjected to witch pricking, where needles were used to stab their skin. If they didn't bleed or feel pain, they were declared guilty. Others were forced to endure humiliating tests designed to expose their supposed connection to demons. But in reality, these tests were just another way to ensure that accusations always led to execution. Its influence didn't just end with the witch hunts. The fear-based logic it introduced, seeing enemies hidden in plain sight, justifying extreme punishment based on suspicion, and using paranoia as a means of control, has been repeated throughout history. Despite being officially condemned by the Church, the Malleus Maleficarum became the ultimate guide for inquisitors, judges, and witch hunters for centuries. It justified the use of torture, public executions, and mass hysteria, fueling an era of fear where suspicion alone was enough to condemn a person to death. It was not just a book. It was a tool of persecution that turned communities against themselves, spreading paranoia like wildfire. Today, the Malleus Maleficarum stands as a grim reminder of the dangers of ignorance and fanaticism. It is studied not for its theological insights, but as evidence of how fear, when given power, can destroy lives. It shows us how a single book, written with conviction but without reason, can shape history in the worst possible way. In modern times, translations of the text, such as the one published by Cambridge University Press in 2006, allow scholars to examine its impact with a critical eye. Its influence has also been referenced in films, literature, and television, often as a symbol of unchecked extremism and the horrors of superstition. But beyond its disturbing content, the Malleus Maleficarum leaves us with an undeniable lesson. When fear is allowed to override reason, the results can be catastrophic. History has shown time and again that when societies act on paranoia rather than truth, injustice prevails. Think for yourselves. Question everything, even this video. Wherever you are, have a great day. And if you enjoyed this content, consider subscribing for more reports. See you in the next video.